Hi, I'm Justin Smith, and you're on the record with the News Reporter. Today's guest is Andy Mills. He is Senior Project Manager with Colliers Engineering and Design. Your firm is involved with the proposed housing development that would be on Old Lake Road, north of Lake Waccamaw. There's been a lot of public interest in that proposal. There's going to be a public meeting Tuesday, June 10th, 6 to 7 p.m. at East Columbus High School. What we wanted to do is bring you on and talk through the project a little bit before that meeting, and I really appreciate you agreeing to be here.
Yeah, no problem.
So will you start out, just tell us a little bit about the project.
Okay, so the property is, like you mentioned, on Old Lake Road. It's bordered by Old Lake Road as well as the game land that surrounds it, wetlands and things of that nature. It's 1,049 acres, and for the most part, it's all flat. You got some wetlands, some flood areas around the fringes of the property. What the client came to me for was, currently it's listed as general use, and they would like to get it rezoned as a PUD, planned unit development, in order to create a residential neighborhood as well as some future commercial along the road.
So one of the aspects of this that has gotten a lot of attention is the maximum number of homes that could be included. And that number is 4,531 homes, correct?
That's correct.
So potentially over a 10 to 12 year period of time, we could be seeing that number of homes. But will you talk about how that process works? Because initially you're hoping to get the county to rezone this land as a planned unit development, but then you would end up going back to the county with more detailed plans that actually show how each phase would be developed. Is that right?
That's correct. So with the planned unit development, what you're doing really is just establishing density. We currently have the 4,500 home sites with the commercial, but once you get into some actual master planning, once you gather your topo, your wetland delineation and things of that nature, 4,531 is the max. Once you start doing the real design with the information we've collected, it could end up being a little less, but that's what the process we're going through currently is, just trying to establish the density. So once this project receives the approval of the PUD, then we will move forward with actual surveying, environmental impact studies, wetland delineations, NCDOT traffic analysis, SHPO, which is a historical and cultural resources, where they go out and identify any archaeological findings, if happens to be any, threatened and endangered species. So, you know, we'll first gather all this information, because as you go through the permitting process, we're dealing with the state, NCDEQ, and other entities. They're going to require this kind of information. So it's a long process. Last week we were at the planning board. That was just the first step. We started this last November, working through just the concept plans and preliminary design. Made our submittal the first of the year. March, we had the neighborhood meeting, which was for all of the neighbors within a 1,000-foot radius of the property. And then from there, it was advertised a couple of times for the planning board meeting, which we were first going to be on the meeting in April. And then it got postponed until May. It was advertised again. So as you know, at last week's meeting, we received approval of the planning board. And what that means is they just approve it to go on to the commissioners for the final reading and discussion, public hearing, and then they'll make their decision to approve it. The meeting we're having on Tuesday night was asked of us by the planning board if we would hold an additional informational meeting to help with anyone who hasn't had opportunity to meet with us and understand the process of the project. So that's what we're doing Tuesday night.
So, as I said in the introduction, you are Senior Project Manager with Colliers Engineering and Design. So, how does your company fit into this project, broadly speaking?
So, with what we do, I mean, we're a national firm. We have over 80 offices across the country, 3,000 employees. And within our company, we are almost like a one-stop shop. We do all the civil site design, we do environmental, we do geotechnical, and as well as land surveying. So we're hoping that as we move forward that, we'll be able to provide as many of those services as possible to the client. For me, with my background, I kind of specialize in residential communities such as this. And so what I'll do is continue to work with the client to take them through the entire process. Once we get the planned unit development zoning approval, then we'll start moving into master planning. And that's when we'll start to gather all this additional information. And then from there, we'll have to go back to the county again for them to review their overall master plan. And then the different phases, which right now I believe we've got it laid out for 4 phases. It could end up with some sub-phases along the way. But each time the county will make submittals for the county to take a look, make sure we're staying in line. We'll have to submit to all the different agencies to get permits. And that's something that we like to make sure everyone understands, that you can't put a shovel in the ground until you get your permits. That means that you've got the approvals from all the agencies, the state and county.
So you mentioned your engineering firm works for the client. And
Correct.
So in this case, the client is who?
So our client is Advanced Land and Timber, and their partnership with the owner, Bay Bridge, who owns the property itself.
Okay. And so part of the plan would be some commercial development that's closest to Old Lake Road.
Correct.
Will you describe what that commercial development could involve?
Well, with residential development such as this size, you're going to need some commercial to come in at some point to help serve the community. We're setting aside enough acreage for grocery stores, hardware stores, restaurants, in retail, and it could even be a little mix of some office. It depends on what the market's driving at that time. But a lot of people they get excited when I say, "Oh, we're going to bring commercial to the area," but the commercial follows the rooftops. So if you don't have the demographics and the density of the residential, it's hard to get commercial in. But with this size community that we're proposing, we feel that you'll see things like grocery stores pop up, and restaurants and pharmacies and things of that nature.
So let's talk about the homes. So you mentioned that they would be constructed in phases, right? The application says that these would probably be stick-built homes that are actually constructed on site, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know what price point those homes would be listed at?
No, I mean, I can't really speak to that right now because that's a ways off. And the way the market changes, by the time you see the first home being built, you're probably looking at least 2.5 years at a minimum, I would say.
Okay, gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about some of the reaction that has popped up in the last week or so since we covered this in the News Reporter. There's been some significant pushback from people who live in that area. Some of their questions or concerns you might be able to address, and some are probably broader in nature and would probably be better directed toward county leaders, okay? But let's start with just the environmental aspects of this. You did mention that ultimately, if approved, if this planned unit development phase is approved, you're still going to have to go through the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Is that right? Can you describe
Right.
that process a little bit more? How can people be assured that this is not going to be damaging to the environment?
Right. So once again, the process we're going through right now is just to create a boundary around the property, changing it from the general use to a PUD. So it just establishes that zoning district for this property. Going forward, before you do any construction and development, you have to have these permits in hand. Everywhere I go right now, the big concern, of course, is water quality, stormwater, and runoff. Especially after last fall when we had the big, 100-year storm event to come through, there was a lot of areas that flooded. Well, in the state of North Carolina, you only have you have requirements in regards to your stormwater ponds of how much of a storm event they have to hold, which is typically a 10-year, 24-hour event, or even up to some areas it's a 25-year event. What we've already proposed here, because the client wants to be good stewards of the land and to the neighbors, we're actually proposing that we will be designing all of our stormwater ponds to hold the 100-year storm event, just like we saw come through last year. This will ensure that there's not any downstream flooding. We understand that we're surrounded by the game land and the waters, and so all this this development will have infrastructure, subsurface piping that will collect stormwater runoff and piping it to multiple ponds throughout the site. And these ponds will be sized to a volume and a surface area to attenuate that 100-year storm event. The state requires stormwater treatment, ponds, in regards to treatment of the water prior to runoff. A lot of municipalities, a lot of counties, they also have a requirement for what we call pre-post. So if you go out there today, whatever you calculate as how much water is running off the site today, once you do your final design at build out, you cannot release more than 10% of that runoff. Columbus County really doesn't have stormwater regulations. They just have in their UDO about information about following the DEQ requirements, NCDOT roadway requirements in regards to drainage. But what I have talked with our client about, and they're on board, is we're going to go over and above all these requirements to ensure we do not have any damaging runoff downstream or downstream flooding.
How are people assured that that vision would actually become a reality? Are those specifics that would be tied to this planned unit development process? Does that come later? How is that actually memorialized on paper?
So in our plan submittal, we've actually got in our general notes that we will be designing our stormwater system to the 100-year storm event.
Okay, all right. So that's already what's been
That's right. So
proposed to the county.
once that plan is approved, then it's set, and they'll hold us to that.
Okay. Some of the other questions that have popped up involve traffic, right? So just some basic math. If you've got 4,500 homes, 2 vehicles per home, that's 9,000 vehicles that could be going up and down Old Lake Road. At what point do you determine whether Old Lake Road can withstand that? Is that a part of the DOT process that you mentioned earlier?
That's correct. So what we'll do is we'll take the traffic engineering side of the project, and we'll have to create a traffic impact analysis. That will be submitted to DOT. Now, in that traffic impact analysis, they don't look at just our project, but they're going to look at surrounding areas. And a lot of times it's not just contained to a driveway entrance or the frontage of a particular project. They're going to look like 5 miles out. So there could be items that DOT comes back and say, down here at the intersection of Green Swamp Road and Old Lake, you're going to have to add in turn lanes. Even where we would connect out on 74, there possibly could be improvements there. So it won't be contained to just our site, they have the opportunity that they can actually require us to do some improvements further out because they look at it as a community. But that will be one of the next processes that we get into while we're working on the master plan. Currently, NCDOT, I believe the last annual average day traffic count was like 1,200 a day on Old Lake Road. But in understanding a little bit about how they do these traffic analysis, doesn't mean you just got that many cars running up and down the road that day. It's kind of linked to certain times of the day, the busier times.
Okay. So let's talk about utilities for a second. The application says that the water would come from the town of Lake Waccamaw, the sewer would come from the city of Whiteville. Have you had conversations with these municipalities yet? Do you have any kind of assurance that they would be able to serve a development like this?
Yeah, so prior to our submittal, we did have conversations with the town of Whiteville in regards to sewer, as well as the town of Lake Waccamaw with water. In regards to the sewer, I think there's probably about a 2 to 3 mile run that would have to be installed from this site to get to the nearest line for Whiteville's sewer system. At this time, they've got current allocation in excess of what we would need, but
meaning they can treat more than you would need.
well, no, as of today, they could treat what we need, but over time, with this site as well as other sites coming in, it's just like anywhere else, that's going to grow. And so what they'll have to do is they'll have to work on expansions to their treatment plant. And that's common. I mean, everywhere that we work, we see this, that what kind of allocation you have today in a wastewater treatment plant may be sufficient, but as your site grows and other sites around the area grows, there's going to always be the opportunity that the municipality will have to expand their permit to expand their plant. So we feel pretty good just from preliminary discussions with the town of Whiteville in regards to sewer. When it gets into the water, that was a little different. I mean, we've got a lot of options with water. Originally, we were told that this property was closer to the Lake Waccamaw utility district, and that's why we started our conversations with Lake Waccamaw. Now, understanding that some of the conversations they talked about, they didn't really have enough wells to supply the water, for the whole project, as well as pressure in order to meet fire flow. There again, it's one of these things that over time, as the build out starts to come, everything has to be expanded. But with a lot of the concerns here lately and some other things that have come up, we're looking at other options. Instead of just relying on going straight into Lake Waccamaw's water system, we've had discussions with the county. The county is expanding their water system and could serve this site, as well as the developer has even discussed setting up their own private system. We could go in, drop wells inside the site, create our own water system, and you could bring in other managing companies to oversee it. They work just like a public utility department, but it would be centralized just to that development.
Let's talk about the cost of potentially, let's say the city of Whiteville over time, if they needed to expand their sewer processing facility. My understanding is ultimately they could pass along a system development fee, is that right? And so ultimately the homeowners in this development would bear that expense?
That's correct, and that's what's been discussed. So what will happen is, these fees that at closings would go to the town to help them with any expense they incur. There are also opportunities to where the developer could put the cost in to install some of these lines and would run right by wooded and vacant properties that could connect later, and there's potential for reimbursement back to the developer to help cover some of his cost.
I see. Let's talk a little bit more about what this development might look like. There are some details in the proposal, including about buffering. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know specifically it says that there would be buffers intended to reduce noise and provide a visual barrier.
Right. And so along the frontage of the property is about 60 acres that's set aside for commercial. Everything else in the project is residential. And with residential, we're looking at possibly 3 sizes of residential single family. We're not proposing any townhomes, apartments, things like that. So these will be single family home sites, which we will have buffers set in place between the commercial and the residential side, as well as along the old Lake Road frontage. And then along the entire property where we have some wetlands and flood lines, we're offering up an additional 30 foot of vegetative buffer all around that as well.
And the plan also talks about amenities within the development that could be built out, sports fields, potentially a pool, that kind of thing. How are those things decided? Do those decisions just happen as this project progresses?
Yeah, so we've dedicated one area central to the whole property that we've got labeled as an amenity site. This would be possibly a clubhouse, pools, pickleball courts, things of that nature, right? So everyone in the community would have that centralized location to go to. Also, once the master plan is in place, where you actually break up some of these pods that we show on the concept plan into real neighborhoods, there will also be some additional open space, common area, active open space areas, pocket parks, things of that throughout the entire community. With the size of this project, in this entire property at 1,049 acres, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say it's about 165 acres of open space is required. So that's going to be spread out among the whole project. So if you're in a neighborhood on the west side of the development, you could be have easy access to walking trails, pocket parks. You could even have a pickleball court in that location. If you're on the opposite side of development, you could have some similar activities. A lot of it's just going to be driven depending on the builders. This could have multiple builders in it. So what the client will do is get some feedback from them in regards to what they would like to see in their portions of the property. And one other thing that we're going to work with in regards to walkability. Every neighborhood or just overall project we work on, we get a lot of feedback from the community. Everyone wants walking trails, sidewalks. And so we try to incorporate that into our master plan to have the entire project to be very walkable, as well as easy access with roadways for transportation purposes.
Have builders been selected?
No.
Okay.
No.
But
it's kind of too early in the process right now for that.
Theoretically, could it be some of these bigger names that we've seen, like D.R. Horton or Ryan Holmes or that kind of thing?
Yeah, it very well could be. It could be one or several of them, and it could also be some of the custom home builders. It's just a matter of who's interested in coming into the area. And a lot of these builders you mentioned, I work with them on other projects in other locations, and they've all got interest in Columbus County.
So let's zoom back out for a second. Some people who live in the eastern part of Columbus County, in that Lake Waccamaw, Buckhead area, they're concerned about how this could change the character of the community, very rural community. There's also questions about not just water and sewer type infrastructure, but infrastructure more broadly speaking, like schools, healthcare facilities, that kind of thing, EMS. How would you respond to those people? Or is that fair to ask you, or should we be asking that of county leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I could really answer a lot of that, you know, in the change of the culture and things of that nature, what people are looking for. I just know that in other locations while I've worked in and had people respond, you know, Columbus County being down here on the coast in southern part of North Carolina is a desirable location. And over the last several years, you know, you've seen a lot of people move into southeastern North Carolina. Everyone knows that there's a lot of development going on in Brunswick County. I think you've seen a lot of development on the south side of Columbus County coming over from South Carolina. And so with what's moving from Brunswick County into Columbus, as well as what's moving in from South Carolina, you know, the central part here is the next location that you'll start to see people move in. And I think a lot of people come here just because, like I said, they like the location. It makes them feel like they're in the country as well. But now, as far as infrastructure goes, you're right. Over time, as this community builds, there'll probably be other communities possibly to start to move in, and then infrastructure will have to be increased. But then again, you've got all these people moving in, these property owners. Well, that's revenue that will start to come into the county to help generate funds to expand. Even with our project, we're looking at possibility of a water tank that may have to be put in on Old Lake Road, which would increase the water pressures in the existing lines and in any of the new lines. So that's a plus. But I think as far as just how people feel about having so many people move in, yeah, maybe you could reach out and speak to some of the local leaders and see what they have to say about that.
Andy Mills, you've been generous with your time. We appreciate you being here. Again, the public meeting is going to be Tuesday, June 10th, 6 to 7 p.m., East Columbus High School. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add?
No, I just hope that everyone who has any concerns or questions will show up on Tuesday night. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to take as much time as we need to help everyone get a better understanding. I know this is something that it's a process that a lot of people don't see all the time. They don't really understand, and you know, when you say 4,500 home sites moving in, people have a lot of questions. So yes, I just would like to see everyone that can make it on Tuesday night show up. Feel free to grab me and ask any questions they have.
All right, Andy Mills, Colliers Engineering and Design, thank you again. Thank you for tuning in to On the Record. For more information about this proposed development, you can see coverage on our website right now. That's at nrcolumbus.com.